following program is brought to you by your friends at PodcastOne.
Majestic Star is now open. All the games and good times you crave are waiting for you. We're safer, cleaner, and looser than ever. With heightened cleaning, 7 floors of gaming action, and hot, loose slots. Your safe bet for action and excitement is here. Time to bring on the fun. Majestic Star Casino. That's more like it.
Visit MajesticStarCasino.com for details. Must be 21. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-9-WITH-IT.
Now more than ever, people want to know if there's anything they can do to help. And the answer is yes at BioLife Plasma Services. Donating plasma at BioLife is something you can do right now, something that really matters. Plasma is desperately needed to create medicines to help treat people with rare diseases, diseases that only plasma can treat. So please, become a donor at BioLife Plasma. Tap now or visit biolifeplasma.com to schedule an appointment.
Killing the Town is brought to you free today by TrueCar. When you're looking to buy a new or used car, visit TrueCar to enjoy a more confident car buying experience.
Previously on Killing the Town.
And I mean, we're going to talk back and forth, right? It's not just me.
Yeah, we can a little bit. I don't want it to be a 50-50 conversation.
Right.
Because
mine usually aren't.
No, very seldom, actually, yeah.
Where's Callis, by the way? Look at what you did for Don Callis. 15 years he was out of the business. They couldn't find it. His picture was on the side of a milk carton. He gets on your show. He becomes your co-host. 3 weeks later, he's booking the world. Imagine if Callis had been here, by the way. His mother, they vaccinated him with a phonograph needle. I always liked his shit when I was the only guy that liked him in the WWF. I was almost on the verge of asking people not to send me any more money because of our big classic wrestling DVD bonanza sale. And when we're shipping this shit out as swiftly as shit can be shipped. And I have no wrap-up for this bit, so I will take a small bow that you can't see on Skype. I should have come up with a punchline. You'll edit this out, I'm sure.
This is Killing the Town with Storm and Cyrus.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 67 of Killing the Town with Storm and Cyrus. And this week, we are remembering one of the greatest big men in pro wrestling history, Bam Bam Bigelow, who passed away 11 years ago this past Friday. And Cyrus, I don't think you ever worked with him, but you must have some memories of Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid watching WWF at the time, he definitely was something different. I think he was sort of, ahead of his time in terms of being a big guy who was very agile. I think that he probably flourished a little more in ECW, where maybe he was used a little bit better. But yeah, a guy who, is obvious now after, once you're trained as a worker, you can pick these things up. It's like you could tell he was just a really good worker, but also athletic and explosive at, what must have been approaching 400 pounds.
Yeah, I remember seeing him first in WWF, and I had seen him on a documentary of some kind, I think, and knew he was really young and green. I was just amazed at how big of an impact he made in WWE, although it was a fairly short run. But when I saw him in Japan, I got to work with him when I was with War. He came over and was working with Tenryu. Watching him live in Japan, it was just amazing, the presence and the strength that he projected. He was just such a beast over there. Unfortunately, I was a babyface and he was a heel, but at the time I was a junior heavyweight and he was a heavyweight, so we couldn't work together really. But Bam Bam kept pushing to do a tag with me and him against Tenryu and Dragon, which would have been so much fun. But again, I was a babyface, so it didn't happen. But yeah, I did. I'm guessing 4, maybe 6, 7 tours of Japan with Bam Bam. And the thing that I was more amazed with than his work was, he was such a big deal. He was a big name guy that had been in WWF, tagged with Hulk Hogan. I don't know in the time frame. I think he'd probably already main evented WrestleMania 11. And he was just one of the boys. It's like he didn't act or carry himself like he was bigger than anybody else. And he was so friendly. And when I worked with him in Japan, it was just the two of us as far as foreigners went. So we hung around a fair bit. We'd go out to dinner together and rode. And he was the only foreigner on the trip when I was in Japan when my daughter Rebecca was born. And while Tenryu was the first one to congratulate me on the birth of my daughter, Bam Bam was the second. And at the end of the tour, because my daughter had been born, I think we had 4 or 5 days left on the tour. We got back to the hotel in Tokyo, and he's like, "Come on, kid, we're going out." It's like, Tenryu gave me some money, wanted me to take you out. We're going out. So I went out with Bam Bam to have a bite to eat, and he was just such a great, down-to-earth, easygoing guy. So I regretted the fact that I didn't get to work with him, but I got to know him really well over there, and he was just so nice and just such a friendly guy, and it's a shame he's gone and that he died so soon. I'm surprised you didn't cross paths with him in ECW. I guess you got there a little after he left. Because when I got to ECW, they were doing the triple threat angle. It was a little bit after I got there, but he had turned on Shane Douglas, where they were doing the thing with Rick Rude, Shane Douglas, and Bam Bam Bigelow. And I was technically the prospect when I was prospecting for the triple threat. I was to replace Bam Bam because he had left, which led to the big match at the arena where it was, Chris Candido, Shane Douglas, and I against Bam Bam Bigelow and Taz. And it was like a big-time main event match in ECW because Taz, I think, was the FTW champion. Bam Bam was either the world champ or the TV champ at the time. Shane might have been world champ. And then Candido and I were the world tag team champs. So I think every title in the company was in the match. And maybe Taz was the TV champ at the time. I don't remember who, but it was like every title I think was in the match, and it was the 5 of us, and it was so cool being out there with those guys. I've actually got a photo of Chris, Shane, and I together in the ring, and it's that match against Bam Bam, and it was really cool. And this is a great story from that. When we were doing the feud on ECW television, Candido and I had to jump Bam Bam in the aisle, and he's out there, and we're supposed to run through the curtain and lay him out with chairs, and I'm the lead guy supposed to whack him with the chair. And if everybody remembers my weak chair shots on Rob Van Dam from Barely Legal, before we went out, Bammer pulled me aside. He's like, "Come on, brother, you got to bring that. Really hit me with it." He says, I don't want it to look weak, so bring it. And I'm like, "All right, Bammer." And when I went through the curtain, he was closer to me than I expected, and I had to swing it sooner than I wanted to. And I didn't get the sideways swing to hit his back, and I caught the back of his head with the lip of the chair and busted him open. And I remember seeing it back. It's like I come through the curtain like I'm a rabid dog, and then I waffle Bam Bam. And when I see him drop and the back of his head start bleeding, it's like I turned into the scared puppy with a, "Oh no, Bammer's going to kill me." Thankfully, I knew him well at that point. When he got in the back, it's like he was totally cool. I apologized a dozen times. And the only thing he was concerned of is that the scar might mess up his ink. And he's like, "Oh, so it'll mess up my ink, brother. It's all right." I'm like, "Okay, Bam Bam, I'm sorry." And I was expecting receipt that never came because we had to do another run-in later in the night where he had to beat me up. And I was like expecting him to kill me, and he totally took care of me. And he was like one of the lightest workers I've ever been in the ring with. And he was like a 400-pound dude. Then I did manage to have 2 singles matches with him, and I was really excited to do it. And the first one, I think, was in Buffalo. And it was one of the few nights that I was off. My brain wasn't functioning, and Bam Bam totally carried me. And we had a good match, but it wasn't as good, and I was disappointed that I let him down. And then a month or 2 later, we had a show. If I had to guess, it was in Baltimore? Yeah, Maryland, somewhere. And we went out, and Bam Bam, before he went out, he's like, "My brain's not in it." I think he was having, problems at home with his wife or something. He's like, "I'm just not into it." I'm like, "Don't worry about it, Bammer." And I got to return the favor and carried him through it. And we had a good match. And again, he thanked me afterwards. And just that triple threat crew in ECW, it's like we sat in the locker room together, we chilled, and he was just one of the nicest, down-to-earth guys, didn't have an ego, so great to work with. And, I was just so sad when he passed. So yeah, those are my Bam Bam stories. And since, you didn't get to work with him, Don, I think we can get to our guests. We've got a lot of good guests lined up. We've got, Dave Meltzer, Rob Van Dam, Chris Jericho, just to name a few, DDP, who knew him as a teenager. So we're going to get to those next. Much like the Hawk Tribute show, I'm going to splice some Bam Bam Bigelow promos between the interviews just as a bridge. I couldn't find good quality shoot interview footage so we could get some actual stories from Bam Bam himself. So we'll splice in some Bam Bam interviews, a few promos just for segues. And first up, let's get to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. I'm joined by Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Thanks for doing this, Dave. And I know you weren't real tight with Bam Bam, but obviously you covered his career as you do pretty much everyone's.
I mean, I knew him, but I mean, like not on a super close basis, but somewhat. I mean, I think that we probably started talking because Larry Sharp, who trained him and was his original manager, and I were pretty good friends, and so I knew him from Larry. And then when he got big in Japan, we actually talked a decent amount when he was working for New Japan, which was pretty early in his career. But the first I had heard of Bam Bam would have been from Paul Heyman, was doing wrestling magazines at the time, and Bam Bam was like his like project. And he just would like write about, Bam Bam Bigelow before the guy ever had a match. I guess because he knew him from Larry and because he saw how athletic he was at whatever he was, 370 pounds or something like that, which at the time he was, more acrobatic than any guy that size by far had ever been. He was doing stuff that nobody else would do at that size. So Paul was just like building him up. And he got, Paul was a master of public relations. He got him on like some television shows, some national shows. And I remember like there was a clip and, he would just show him training. This before he ever had a match, coming off the top rope at that size, which nobody did. And, drop kicks, standing drop kicks and things like that. And I actually remember Joel Watts, who was Bill's son, had seen one of the shows that I had also seen. And we were just going like, oh my God, it's like, I mean, we've never seen him do a match, but it kind of blew you away how agile he was, that there might be something there. And he had a great look. And I mean, I think he brought it to Bill, and Bill was like, who do you ever beat? I mean, which I always thought was like, what a response. Because the guy had no experience, and I don't think Bill was ready to take a test on someone with 0 pro matches, no matter how he looked in, cut up videos. But it was just like, who did he ever beat? So then, pretty soon after, Paul would book squash matches in nightclubs with Bam Bam, and mostly for photos and everything like that. They'd be like 2-minute matches, and he would just destroy guys. And so then that's where he got more pictures in the magazines. But the first territory he worked would have been Memphis, and he went in there. So I guess probably Lawler or Jarrett, one of those two, probably saw the same stuff we did and was kind of like, well, you know what? I mean, a guy like that, we got Jerry Lawler, you know what I mean? And so he comes in like, probably his second week in the territory working with Lawler on top, and beats Lawler, and they have a big program. And so I'm watching these matches, and now I'm really thinking this guy's the greatest thing of all time, because can you imagine, like, I mean, he may have known nothing, but he could do what he could do. But he's working with Jerry Lawler, who was like this in his hometown where Lawler was the master worker and knew how to work, just sell, and just let the guy do his drop kick and his splash off the top and his other stuff. And people were just blown away by it because they'd never seen anything like it from a big guy. But then he went to Texas with George Scott as Crusher Yurkov. Why you would change the name when Paul had gotten him national publicity, I have no idea. They tried to make him a Russian. And because he was a heel, they told him not to do any of that stuff. So, then we saw how not experienced he was. It wasn't, and even then he was all right. He wasn't bad, but it was just they took away his best stuff, and and he wasn't working with Jerry Lawler, so there's a big difference. But the Japanese loved him, and they got him in there real quick, and they pushed him as the top foreign guy. They had him beat Fujinami, which almost nobody did, and they had him beat Maeda, which at a time when nobody did. And the only one they wouldn't let him beat was Inoki. Inoki would always beat him, but he was top foreigner, and he in that period really improved, because you're working with those great guys every night, and that was before WWF, and then he went to WWF, and he got that big push with all the managers wanting him. I mean, it was the Randy Savage push. I mean, they really went all out with him, and I think that they had really high expectations for him, and it didn't really pan out the first time. He got on, I think he got on some people's nerves or something, or they thought, he wasn't quite as good as we thought he was, or maybe there was an attitude issue. I know that because they had Sika do a number on him at a show once, and Andre once, and he ended up being gone, and ended up back with New Japan for a while. But they didn't. The second time with New Japan, they did pretty well with him, but not as much. And then he did the thing with the chemo fight, and after that, it was kind of like, which was probably it was a good payoff. I remember him telling me he made $80,000 for the chemo fight, but at the time in Japan, that was probably a bad thing to do. For a pro wrestler to go in there and get, a monster pro wrestler to go out there and get destroyed in an MMA fight. And so he ended up working with Tenryu.
He was working with Tenryu when he did the chemo fight, because I was working in Japan with him when he was preparing for the chemo fight.
Okay, so I got my timeline mixed up, but I know that the New Japan, I remember Fujinami was real mad about that, just saying like pro wrestlers shouldn't be doing this, and but yeah, he had a big name then, and then he came back to WWF and worked for WCW and ECW when he, Paul always liked him and brought him into ECW late, and that's, the one thing that I remember was there was a period where the boxing people saw him and thought that he would make a great opponent for Mike Tyson because of the tattoos and the size and all that. And, there was, I remember talking to him and also Vader, and they were both talking. He was getting like decent offers to box Mike Tyson as this gimmick thing. They were looking for, Mike Tyson was just an incredible draw, and it never happened, thank God. So I remember talking to him about the Tyson stuff a lot. And I remember with Maeda, when he lost to Maeda, Maeda was, Maeda wouldn't put over any Americans, but I guess they asked him with Bam Bam because Bam Bam was the top foreigner. So he put him over, but he did it very reluctantly and pretty much unprofessionally, because Bam Bam, like afterwards, I remember him going like, what do you know about Maeda? This is after he won. And I go, well, I couldn't believe that you beat him clean, because he never loses to Americans. And he goes, oh, that's what it was. And I go, why? And he goes, oh, he's spitting at me and slapping me and just really unprofessional about it. Well, I get it. He just didn't want to put me over, but he did. So, but he wasn't mad about it at all, like about the way Maeda did that. He was mad at the time. But then when I explained it, he goes, oh, I understand now. And it was like, oh, okay, I get it. Because I was talking about the shooter rep and everything. So it's like he didn't hold a grudge about it or anything. He just didn't know the story. And, he was always real nice and everything like that. And I know, that's kind of my remembrances of him. The big thing was when he first came around was there was nobody that size with that kind of agility. And that really helped him a lot in Japan. And, I think it probably helped him a little bit in WWF. I know, obviously the Lawrence Taylor thing was probably his highest profile match because it was the real main event at a WrestleMania. And that, to me, the two things about that match that really tell you a lot is, number one, he was in there in the main event of WrestleMania against a guy who had never had a match, who's as great an athlete as he may be, who didn't know what he was doing, who blew up right away. And it tells you how much trust they had in Bam Bam to carry the match. And the match itself, I thought, was quite good for what I expected of it, and for what it could have been with somebody not so good. And the other was that they felt that Bam Bam's look and ability to talk and put over a match was good enough, because you got to remember that this was not a match geared towards wrestling fans. This was a match geared towards sports fans and mainstream, and they were looking for a guy who would transcend. And the whole thing of Bam Bam was, the gimmick of that match was that Bam Bam was out there doing talk shows and everything, not saying that wrestling was a work, but it was implied that it was, but implying and trying to get over the idea that he truly didn't like Lawrence Taylor, and that while wrestling may be a work, I am not a work, and this match is not going to be a work, even though obviously it was. But that was the goal, and that's what they trusted him to be able to pull off. And I remember his demeanor and everything like that, and I always thought, like, he's handling it really well. You watch it and you just go like, well, maybe. And that's what they were looking for, is not necessarily convincing people, but enough in their head of, well, maybe he really doesn't like Lawrence Taylor, and maybe this is going to be something.
Yeah, I just watched that match, and it's surprisingly good. Like, obviously it's not a great match because Lawrence Taylor had never wrestled before, but I think the key was Bam Bam was willing to let Lawrence Taylor hit him, and he really bumped his ass off for him, and it was surprisingly good.
I remember being impressed by it, because and knowing that was obviously Bam Bam, that was the reason that Lawrence, for a first match, Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad at all. I mean, I've seen NFL players, I mean, now Kevin Green being the exception, but most NFL players in their first matches, I mean, it's a struggle for sure, because it's not like they've gone through months of training, I mean, in most cases it's some training, but very limited.
Am I crazy? My first memory of Bam Bam, I could have the show wrong. I could have swore I saw a piece on 60 Minutes about Bam Bam training at the Monster Factory.
I don't remember 60 Minutes, but I don't know that you're wrong, but I do remember seeing, and I couldn't tell you the shows, if it was like Inside Edition or E or whatever, but those type of shows, I remember, because that was the thing I said with the Joel Watts thing, that I remember that was when I saw him visually for the first time, and it was like, oh my God, a great look and great athletic ability, and I mean, this guy looks like he looked like a main event heel, and and he turned into a main event heel real quick anyway. I mean, he was in his second week in Memphis, so you probably saw, maybe it was 60 Minutes doing a thing on the Monster Factory, and they would show Bam Bam. That's possible, yeah.
Yeah, I may be wrong on the show, but I definitely saw the documentary, and then it was from when I saw the show to when I saw him in WWE was a very short period of time. I'm like, this guy's right out of wrestling school. I couldn't believe it. And
he was in WWE pretty quick.
Yeah,
for the first run, yeah.
What was his most successful run? The tag run with Vader in New Japan?
I think his most successful run would have been that first New Japan singles run, where he was the top guy and he was on top on the big shows month after month. Where with Inoki and everything like that. The big singles run. When Vader came, Vader kinda. I think because Vader was more aggressive, and also they put a lot behind Vader. So I mean, like Vader, because Vader actually got to beat Inoki, which Bam Bam never did. So that kind of already put Vader a little bit ahead of him. So, but he was a good utility guy, because he actually did the other thing with Bam Bam. Besides Lawrence Taylor, is he actually had two of those exact same things before. Because at the very first Tokyo Dome, he wrestled Salman Hashimikov, who was a Russian multi-time national champion amateur wrestler. Hashimikov, they wanted to build up to being a big star, so they put him with Bam Bam, and he beat Bam Bam. And it was a short match, but it got over great because Bam Bam, bumped for him. And, when in those days, seeing a guy suplex around a guy the size of Bam Bam was in Japan was going to instantly get you over. And then it was, that's 89. And then like a year later with Koji Kitao, who you will remember.
I
sure.
worked with him.
Yeah. So Koji Kitao was a sumo who was supposed to be the big star of sumo and was already promoted to grand champion. And then at 24, I think he got into a fight or something and he was kicked out. So he ended up in pro wrestling, and with incredible fanfare for his first match. And it was also at the Tokyo Dome. It was in the 1990 New Japan show. And, again, they put Bam Bam in there to put him over, to give him instant credibility. And so, I mean, that tells you that, it's three different types of guys in their first match that needed to go over. And Bam Bam was picked because he knew how to, he could bump and sell, but he was big enough and mean enough and had the look and the credibility that beating him made you kind of like an instant star, even though, I don't know that Kitao was able to maintain that. And he really didn't. And Hashimikov didn't really either, but they both got off to great starts because of Bam Bam.
Noticing a trend here that Bam Bam was really a go-to star maker. You mentioned it with Hashimikov, where they tried, and Kitao, but I don't think people give him enough credit for his time in ECW. Everybody remembers what Funk did to help put ECW on the map, but Bam Bam was the one that gave Rob his big win. He was the guy that gave Taz that big program and win. He seems to have really been a go-to guy to help get over that big star.
Yeah, when you were starting on that thing, and I started thinking Taz, because like Paul's idea for Taz obviously was the shooter, and the one thing with Bam Bam is that Bam Bam had the credibility of all those years of being a main eventer, and plus he was big and mean, and people bought him as, I don't know about legit, but yeah, I think so. I think that people believe that he was, the bounty hunter stories. And Bam Bam was a really good high school wrestler who probably could have been a good college wrestler, had he, not done whatever he did after high school. I mean, I remember him telling me the stories of, he was a bounty hunter and didn't go to college, and I don't remember exactly what happened with high school, but I know that he was recruited as a heavyweight, by Division I programs, but he never went.
What are your recollections? Because Bam Bam really disappeared off the face of the earth for a while. Do you remember the story of him saving kids from a burning, like a forest or bush or whatever? But I vaguely remember stories of that it was near his house and he ran into the fire 2 or 3 times to save some kids and got burned up really bad.
Burned, right?
Yeah, bad.
Yeah. I vaguely remember that. Yeah. Yeah, because
I worked with him in war and then again in ECW, and I really loved the guy. He was really good to me. He was actually on the tour in Japan when my daughter was born, and he took me out for dinner afterwards as a congratulations. So it's like Bam Bam and I went way back, and he was really cool. And I remember hearing the story of him saving kids, and I thought, that's the Bam Bam I know, just selflessly running into a fire to help kids.
Well, the one thing about his career that I think that when we go through this is that Bam Bam's ultimate, role or biggest matches were, making guys who weren't that good, that had to look good because there was so much pressure, whether it's the main event at WrestleMania or the second from the top at the Tokyo Dome, and, them not just trusting him, but making it work. The Hashimikov thing, I remember when that match took place, when it was over in Japan, because, it was the first Tokyo Dome, people were just, oh my God, Hashimikov, he suplexed Bam Bam, it was in all the papers. And he became an instant star. And Katao was probably even more because Katao had to look good because there was so many eyeballs on it. And I think if Katao had started with a green guy or something like that, or, it could have been, I don't know about a disaster, but, I'm sure it wouldn't have been as good with almost, he was clearly the right guy for that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his legacy was making stars and being the guy that people trusted when they really needed somebody.
Yeah, and the forerunner of the athletic big guy, where coming off the top rope. I remember with watching him do a drop kick off the top rope, and it's like a guy that size in that era. Just the fact he did a drop kick, a good drop kick too, not just a drop kick, was amazing enough, because we had Blackwell used to do was shorter and much heavier than Bam Bam, and Blackwell would drop kick, which was considered amazing at the time, but it was adequate drop kick. But the fact, whereas like a Braun Strowman thing now, Braun Strowman does drop kick, it's really cool because but Bam Bam threw like a real drop kick. It looked like a 240-pound athletic guy drop kick, not a guy who happens to be able to get off the ground a little bit. Not quite your drop kick, but you know what I'm saying. But like a real pro, good drop kick guy drop kick.
Yeah, not just you're happy that he accomplished it. He actually did a good one.
Yeah, right.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it, Dave. I love looking back at Bam Bam's career because he was a good friend of mine, and I really miss him. And it's nice that he's got a legacy that people can remember.
Next week, right here, Bam Bam Bigelow will engulf the WWF superstars in flames. Bam Bam! Bam Bam!
All right, I am joined by Rob Van Dam. And Rob, you worked with Bam Bam in ECW, and I think you actually won the TV title from him originally.
Dude, everyone knows I won the TV title from Bam Bam originally. Yeah, that was awesome. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but in case anybody doesn't know, one of my particularly favorite highlights of my whole career. In fact, going into that, I was really enjoying ECW like a lot of us were artistically, and I was watching, I was still, every week I was trying to outdo myself from the week before and be extreme that way and figure out a new way to put a twist on some move, something like that. And after the match with Bam Bam, which, we'll get back to, but just to show you how much that impacted my career, it was the next show after the TV title match where I won the championship from Bam Bam, and I was wrestling Mikey Whipwreck in Queens in New York. And before the doors were open, I was doing my normal thing, just trying to visualize and imagine what I could do. And I asked Paul, I said, "Hey, Paul, what do you think about this? What if I crotch Mikey Whipwreck on the guardrail here on the entrance where they come out, and then I springboard off of the other guardrail, like parallel, and like fly across, all the way here and kick him off? Like, you think that'd be like really cool?" And Paul just looked at me and goes, "Rob, I don't think it matters what you do tonight. These people are going to go nuts." And I really didn't know what he meant. I was like, "Oh, well, all right, cool." He goes, "You don't understand. It's different now. You're going to be so over." And I really didn't know what he meant, but it was very obvious when I came out to wrestle that night. Holy crap, did the people treat me different. That was, for me, that match in that accomplishment of winning the television championship from Bam Bam Bigelow was the night that I became a superstar.
Yeah, I think a lot of us didn't realize, because we were so busy all trying to make our mark, how big of a deal Bam Bam was. Like, he main evented a WrestleMania, and then he's in ECW working with guys like us. And yeah, I agree. Him putting you over in Buffalo, I believe it was a big deal. And that was also where the big highlight dive of yours that's in the open of every ECW show is when you dove out onto Bam Bam.
Exactly. That's classic footage. I still see it very often. And I loved working with Bam Bam. And to what you said, I did, the wrestling fan in me, of course, did realize, wow, this is Bam Bam Bigelow. It's really cool, working with him. And I also realized that just like with Sid Vicious when he was there and Rick Rude, I felt like, wow, these guys are helping get ECW over. And so, like, I had a sense of that. But obviously, like I said, I couldn't have expected like the change in the way that the industry and the fans treated me, all positive, and it was like, I liked Bam Bam. He was super cool outside of the ring, like I didn't travel a ton with them or really know them like, some guys, that you eat with for years and years, whatever. But I hung out with him some, and he came out in the back with us hoods that were, causing a little smoke in the parking lot or whatever. He was all right. He was a good guy. I liked his vibe. And I remember one time, Sabu used to have the Winnebago. And being in Sabu's clique, we would take the Winnebago from town to town. Sabu, myself, Louis Piccoli, Pee Wee, the referee, and the wives when they were around. And then we would park outside the venue in the Winnebago because Sabu, he would shower in there, change everything, get ready, have dinner in there. And I recall one time, this was the first video game that I was on, at least that I knew about. It was called Superfire Pro Wrestling, or Pro Res, as they say it. And Superfire Pro Res was, it had a bunch of us. I think they ripped us off, instead of using our actual names, but we were all on it. And you were too, Lance, you probably know that. But Bam Bam was out in the Winnebago, and I was sitting beside him on the couch, and we were playing the video game on Sabu's TV, each playing ourselves. So he was Bam Bam, and I was RVD, and we had a blast doing that. And I thought, wow, how surreal! Like, fans would probably appreciate this moment if someone caught it, but it was a real moment.
That's really cool. Yeah, he was really down to earth. I worked with him in Japan and then in DCW, and since he was part of the Douglas Candido triple threat, and I was tight with Chris, I got to hang out with him a lot, and he was really laid back and super light and super safe in the ring too.
And he was also, super cool outside, but he was also business in the ring. You might not have ever had the same experience because I was sometimes, I don't know if you ever noticed, sometimes I was a little bit snug. I don't know if you ever heard that or anything, but Bam Bam was a receiver. And I loved that about him, because it was all business, nothing personal. But like when I would have my matches with him, like say I take a chair, we're outside the ring, and I'm waiting for him to feed up. I want to whack him in the back with a chair, whack, and then if I was off mark a little bit, and I think, oh shit. Oops, I said, oh, I think I got, part of his elbow, or that didn't land flat, or ooh, man, that was really in there, or whatever. Guaranteed, the next move he did to me he was going to turn him like wham and clothesline me or slam me right on the floor, bam, so hard, and then it was cool again immediately right afterwards.
Were you there the night at the arena? It was Bam Bam, Taz, and Sabu in a 3-way. And I remember watching on the monitor, and Sabu had just finished, I think, using the chair on Taz, and he threw it behind him without looking, and it spun and caught Bam Bam right in the face.
Oh,
and Bam Bam just picked up the chair and started walking towards Sabu, and everybody in the back's like, Bammer's got the chair. And Sabu just looked up at him, realized that he had screwed up, and just tucked his head a little bit and fed him, and Bam Bam drove him into the ground like a steak. And then everything was forgotten, and they just moved on.
Yeah, what else can you do? You got it coming. At least you don't have to worry about it getting personal and someone later on, saying, hey, that wasn't cool. Well, remember, and at least this way it was, it was like instant. He was like, he knows he didn't mean nothing behind it. He don't mean nothing behind this either. Wham! We're good. I believe in balance. It's all about balance. Yeah. Bam Bam was awesome, and in that match, and those dives, like that was him, just like saying he was. I remember when we were talking about doing that dive, and it was just like, boom, you know what? Hell yeah, man, Bam, hit me, go back in the ring, do another one. I was like, really? Like, he was so giving and generous, and that's what he was there for, and he knew. I saw a video just yesterday. It might have been one of those GIFs on social media or something, but Taz, he did some kind of a suplex to Bam Bam in the aisleway, like wham, like right over the guardrail into the crowd. And, moves like that, Bam Bam didn't have to take, those are like the bigger star they are, sometimes the less they have to break their bodies and sacrifice and take chances. But also, that comes with professionalism and certain people that don't want to disappoint their fans. And that was a style of ECW. And damn, he totally fit right in.
Yeah, I don't think Bam Bam's remembered well enough for what he did for ECW with the TV title match with you. He did the world title feud with Taz and took the crazy bumps through the ring with him. And then he also had the program with Shane Douglas where he put Shane over for the title at one time. Everybody remembers everything Terry Funk did, which was a lot, but Bam Bam really contributed too. Yeah, he really did. And I remember seeing him on TV when I was leaving my family's house, and I think I'm not sure if he started long before me, but I don't think I was in the business yet. I think I might have been training at that time, but it seems like I was leaving to go watch a local wrestling show, and then the news had some media on. That's what it was. The news just had some media, a little story about wrestling, because they were coming to the Kellogg Center, and it showed the Monster Factory in New Jersey, and I saw Bam Bam Bigelow on that news clip, and he was like one of the students there. And I think Raven might have been there. Did he get trained by the Monster Factory? Because it seems like there was I remember some guy eating a heart, and he had like I don't know why, I think that might have been Raven, like with anyway, Bam Bam was so, we remember it was the first guy seen that had tattoos on his head, and he was a real big dude, and he's doing like somersaults and cartwheels, and actually saw him on the news at training, and at that, of course, I had no idea, one, that he would be such a huge superstar and icon, or whatever you want to call him. Definitely one of the historical, greats, legend, and also, of course, I could have no idea that someday I'd be in the ring working with the guy, but super cool. And I was very, very sorry to see him go. He liked to party, I think, too hard. Yeah, he's not the only one in the industry that fell to that, unfortunately. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, Rob. Much appreciated. Thanks a lot.
Okay, cool. Good talking to you, Lance. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks,
Take
Rob.
care.
Before we get to our next guest, I'd just like to point out, if you're looking to buy a car, you're probably familiar with terms like MSRP. You might even know what it stands for. I didn't. But what does it actually mean? Same goes for invoice, list price, dealer price. It's enough to confuse just about anybody. All you're really looking for is a price that actually means something. Introducing True Price from TrueCar. Now you can know exactly what you'll pay for the car you want, including fees and accessories, before you even get to the dealership. TrueCar dealers will show you the true price on cars like the one you want, all from the comfort of your home.
And Cyrus, how do you know if your true price is a great price? Because TrueCar shows what other people paid for the same car you want. And your certified dealers know this. So they set their true price competitive so they can win your business. So when you're ready to buy a new or used car, visit TrueCar to enjoy a more confident car buying experience.
Some features not available in all states.
Majestic Star is now open. All the games and good times you crave are waiting for you. We're safer, cleaner, and looser than ever. With heightened cleaning, 7 floors of gaming action, and hot, loose slots. Your safe bet for action and excitement is here. Time to bring on the fun. Majestic Star Casino. That's more like it.
Visit MajesticStarCasino.com for details. Must be 21. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-9-WITH-IT.
Now more than ever, people want to know if there's anything they can do to help. And the answer is yes, at BioLife Plasma Services. Donating plasma at BioLife is something you can do right now. Something that really matters. Plasma is desperately needed to create medicines to help treat people with rare diseases. Diseases that only plasma can treat. So please, become a donor at BioLife Plasma. Visit biolifeplasma.com to learn more.
Hey, it's Rob Riggle.
And Sarah Tiana.
And you are listening to Wriggle's Picks.
Yeah, and a ham horn, and we have a new podcast. You can find our show exclusively on the PodcastOne app, on PodcastOneSports.com, and don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Every Thursday, we're going to sit around and we're going to talk about the things that really excite us, like life, comedy, sports, a lot of sports.
Ourselves.
A lot of Sarah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you join us.
Hey, this is Chris Jericho inviting you to the first ever Rock and Wrestling Rager at Sea. Picture this: rock and roll, wrestling, comedy, live podcasting, all on the open ocean from October 27th to the 31st, 2018, from Miami to Nassau. I'm bringing Hall of Fame wrestlers, some of the greatest rock and roll bands on the planet, and putting the first wrestling ring on a cruise ship ever. Don't be a stupid idiot. Make the list. Check us out at ChrisJerichoCruise.com.
And now back to Killing the Town.
I'm joined now by Chris Jericho. And Chris, you worked with Bam Bam a couple times in some important matches in your career.
Yeah, I did. It's funny because I only had maybe 2 or 3 encounters with Bam Bam, but they were all fairly memorable. And the first one was in Winnipeg. I was there around Christmas time, I think of '94. And I was flying from Winnipeg to Japan around the Christmas time. It was like I said, like go for Christmas and then whatever it was, New Year's, and then fly to Japan afterwards. And for some reason, I guess WWE must have had a show in Winnipeg the night before, although I don't know why I didn't know about it. But anyways, I was flying on a plane from Winnipeg to Minneapolis with the WWF at the time crew. So, and you remember how it was when we first started out, like, you're an indie guy and we had a little bit of steam in different places, but hadn't really seen too many, living, breathing WWE guys up close. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So to see them, it was always like a little bit nerve wracking because it's like seeing these mythical creatures and they're like the Jedi Knights and we're just like the lowly Padawans, like just trying to break in. And it's always like that awkward, moment of trying to figure out like how do you approach them and say hi and what do you do, right? And I vividly remember that it must have been '95 because I'd been in Japan a bunch of times at that point because '94 I was there quite a bit. So I remember Jeff Jarrett and Bam Bam Bigelow. And Winnipeg Airport, once you go through customs at the time, it was a really small waiting area. There's only 2 gates and you're basically all in one big room. So And, the boys kind of can always pick out other boys. Like, we're pretty much, like, stand out from the rest of the world, So even with me at the time, remember how I used to dress was always like, jeans and bracelets and long hair. And, it's obvious that I do something. And I didn't know how to break the ice. I remember I wanted to try and say something, say hi. And actually, Bam Bam said to me, he said, "Hey, are you one of the boys?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You work for Tenru, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." Like, how the fuck does he know this? And he said that he had just been there, or I don't know exactly what, or maybe he followed the scene. And he said he'd recognized me from a magazine or something like that. And I was basically like, "Where are you going to?" "I'm just going to Japan." "Oh, well, good luck, man. It's a good place over there. It's a lot of fun." And that was basically it. But out of all the guys that were on the crew, and how many guys travel, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 guys, he was the only guy that actually, acknowledged my existence and said something, which at the time meant a lot, when somebody would actually, recognize that you're in the business as well. So that was kind of something that I never forgot. And then that leads to when he actually did come and work for Tenru. I'm assuming he probably was let go from Vince or decided to move on or whatever his career trajectory was. And this was pre-ECW and pre-WCW. He was working in Japan quite a bit for Tenru, and I was actually in a match with him. It was me. Here's a tag team for you. Me, the Warlord, and Vampiro versus Tenru, Onita, and Bam Bam Bigelow. It was a 6-man tag team tournament, and that was the team, which from a Japanese standpoint, that's a pretty freaking big team. You know what I mean? When you're talking about Japan.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like with Onita and Tenru, obviously two of the biggest kind of independent stars, legends, and then Bam Bam was a huge star in Japan. And I remember two things about that. One was I was warming up in the mirror before, it was in the sumo arena in Ryogoku, and behind me, as I'm warming up doing my isometrics or whatever, and behind me, Warlord walks past me in the mirror. So I'm just seeing myself, and then I see Warlord behind me, and Bam Bam was sitting in the corner. He goes, "Kid, just fucking stop, give up, forget about it." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right, And then during the match, I actually gave a lion salt to Onita and hit him in the face with my knee and knocked him out. And I remember I was thinking to myself, I could literally pin this guy right now and get fired the moment I walked through the curtain, but I could have, a huge angle with Onita. But, the thought of FMW again, and plus, our history with Onita, knocking him out actually felt pretty good.
Do you remember what I told you before you went for that tour?
No.
Right before you left, you told me you were working with Onita, and because of our ill-fated FMW tour, I said, "Do me a favor, potato him for me."
Well, I did, and I did potato him for you. And like I said, Bam Bam didn't have anything to do with it, but he was out there standing there. So whenever I think of Bam Bam, I always think of knocking Onita out with a knee to the face. And it was like 1, 2, and I did the old pull his shoulder up in a shitty kick out, to continue the match. But then the last experience I had with Bam Bam, like I said, these are the only 3 times I ever saw this guy. And all 3 of them were memorable. And you cross paths with guys quite often, but with him, it was only these 3 times. And it was it was called the World Peace Festival, World Wrestling Peace Festival, or something. Maybe just World Peace Festival. And it was it's so crazy to think about. It was in 1996, and it was in the LA Forum, which is a big arena. I think the WWE works there now. They just refurbished it, but it's it's an arena. It holds 10, 15,000 people, whatever it does. And Inoki put together this kind of all-star show with, and once again, the political ramifications of this is actually pretty insane. He was able to work this out, but it was New Japan, AAA, and WCW. And all 3 companies had matches on this card. So it was kind of like promoted for, I don't know, whatever the hell Inoki was promoting. And I tried so hard to get on this show because it was in LA, and I knew a couple of the low level. I remember we used to go through LA with WAR, and did you work one time or maybe not? But I used to work independent shows in LA when I was there. If I get there, for a connection, I'd stay a day and try and work. I remember I worked the show for Superboy, was one of the promoters, just these shitty little lucha shows. But, just trying to get out there and get your name out there and do whatever you can to kind of get ahead and get some more bookings. And so I heard about this World Wrestling Peace Festival, and I worked my ass off to try and get on it. And I called everybody. I called Superboy and all these different guys that I was trying to, get in there with. And lo and behold, one way or another, I'm still not sure exactly how I did it. This is pre-internet, so there's no tweeting and no internet and no websites. I've somehow got myself booked on the show, and thinking, well, maybe this is the chance I've been looking for to get in front of these WCW guys and try and get in there, because I knew Bischoff was going to be there, and plus New Japan too. Like, what a huge thing. So I got booked on the show. I flew myself there and had no idea what match I was going to be in, because at the time I had a little bit of steam in Mexico and Japan, but I'm thinking, I don't work for New Japan, I don't work for WCW. I'm kind of the low end of the totem pole here. Nobody even knows who the hell I am. And I show up there and find out that not only am I in a match, I'm in like the semi or third main event in a three-way match with Conan and Bam Bam Bigelow. Most random of bookings ever. And I'd known Conan from Mexico. Like I said, I met Bam Bam, twice. And here I am freaking in this match, like a three-way match. And I'll never forget, Tiger Hattori was the referee, who still works for New Japan to this day. He's one of the guys, he might actually be my referee at the Tokyo Dome on January 4th. I don't know. But he said, okay, so the finish is, Bam Bam goes over. And Bam was like, nah, why are we doing that? Let's put Jericho over. And really? I think that he and New Japan were having some kind of a disagreement. I got the vibe that he was, if they said the sky was blue, he would say, no, it's red. Like F you guys type thing. I mean, you know the history of Bam Bam and know his attitude and know how he was. He basically didn't give a shit. Like, that's the kind of vibe I got from him. And I'm sure everyone else is telling you those stories where he really didn't care. So whatever the reason was, he said, no, let's put Jericho over. And now you're like, no, this is how ridiculous is this now? Even more so. Conan is the head of AAA. Bam Bam's the biggest star in New Japan. I don't work for any of these companies, and Bam Bam's put me over. And I remember he said, I'll tell you what the finish is when it's right. Okay. So we had this match, and I don't think I've ever seen it. I saw some pictures from it that some of the Japanese photographers took. But he said at one point he was beating me up, and he said, I'm going to give you a German suplex, and you raise your shoulders before 3. And that was what he did. He gave me a German suplex. 1, 2, I raised my shoulders. Hattori counted 3 and raised my hand as the winner. So to this day, still not completely sure why he went out of his way to put me over. And as we know, I mean, reality of it, who cares who won the match? More importantly, and Conan did his part too. I mean, say what you want about Conan, but that guy was really over, and he knew how to work his style as well. Both those guys made me look great, and I'm not saying it had anything to do with it, but the moment that match was done, I remember Eric Bischoff actually came up to me, and actually that's not even the truth. He sent word, because he left early, and I think it was Paul Orndorff or somebody, whatever, said that, we want to meet you in Atlanta in a week. Come to Atlanta and we'll talk about a deal. And, whether that's because of Bam Bam making me look great, or I know there was a couple tapes around that had been sent around, and maybe Bischoff finally seeing me face to face was all he needed. But, I'd have to think that in some respect, Bam Bam had something to do with that, because it was when you come out of the ring, you remember if it's a good match or not, and you don't need people to tell you.
Absolutely.
And right. And there was no social media to go online and go on Twitter and find out what everyone else thought. And I've never seen it. I don't even know if it even exists. But to me, when I think of that match, I still think that's a pretty freaking good match for 3 guys that had never worked each other before. So I would have to think Bam Bam had a whole hell of a lot to do with that. And in reality, let's be honest, he could have just went out there and squashed me. He didn't have to do shit. I mean, I think there was 5,000 people in the place, if that. And, his reputation was made, as was Conan's. Mine was not. But both those guys, and more specifically Bam Bam, really went out of their way to make me look great. So just kind of shows you, to me, what kind of a guy he was to be that much of a pro when he definitely didn't have to be.
Yeah, and you downplay, the wins and losses. Back in the mid-'90s, people were a lot more protective of doing jobs or not. It wasn't like today where nobody really cares that much unless it's, the main event for a championship. Guys put people over all the time, but back in the 90s, not so much.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're talking about guys who had a big name value in Japan. I mean, you would hear stories, about Hansen and Brody, those type of guys. Steve Williams would never do jobs anywhere because if somebody took a picture of it and put it in a magazine, their reputations could be ruined. Never mind a Japanese show. So here's Bam Bam Bigelow, who, once again, like I said, he was headlining shows, right around that time frame in WAR and all these other companies, putting me over. And I think he had gone back to New Japan at that point in time, or like I said, whatever the controversy was. It's 23 years ago. I don't remember what exactly happened. I just know that for him to do that, knowing that people would see it, because the whole place was Japanese photographers, that's a great point. It did show that, and maybe he watched my match that night with Onita, or maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe he just, wow, that guy looks good. Put him in there. I'll put him over. But it did make a big difference for me to have that match, and to go over definitely didn't hurt. But it could have hurt him if the match didn't go well. And maybe that's why he said he'll call a finish out there. Maybe if I sucked, maybe he would have just beat me. Who knows, right?
Yeah, no kidding. It's not an often time you go to the ring without knowing what the finish is. Yeah,
and once again, like, to me, just being on this show, I thought I was going to be in opening match 8-man luchador with Superboy and all these, local California guys. But to be in that match at all was crazy huge. And then to hey, man, whatever you want to do, if you want to call the finish out there, that's fine with me, man. Like, once again, like I said, there's still a little bit markish a bit. That's Bam Bam Bigelow. Like, oh my gosh, he headlined WrestleMania the year before. I mean, that was a big, big deal for me. It was one of the cornerstones of my career up to that point. And like I said, whether it's 1% or 10% or 50%, Bam Bam Bigelow did have something to do with me getting that initial chance with WCW for sure. Definitely one of the best big men of all time. You got to think of Undertaker, Kane, and Bam Bam as being the best workers, and Big Show as well. But you know what I mean? He was a big dude that could really work, and I'm glad I had a few brushes with him for sure.
All right, man. Thanks so much.
All right, dude. Anytime. Thanks.
That's right. King of the Ring in just 3 weeks away. I'll be wrestling Jim Duggan in the first round on my way to becoming the King of the Ring. And nothing's going to stop me. And there's a couple rules here. You not only have to win once, you not only have to win twice, but you have to win 3 times. You lose and you're out. Duggan, I'm in, you're out. Bam Bam Bigelow, the beast from the East, is going to be King of the Ring.
I'm joined by Mr. Jim Cornette. You seem to be a regular on these shows, but I know you worked with Bam Bam Bigelow.
Well, and thank you, Lance, for having me on again. And I'd like to think it's because of my encyclopedic knowledge of many of the subjects of your programs. I think it's also because at least I'll bring a lighthearted story to an otherwise somewhat somber subject every once in a while. But no, Bam Bam. He was on my radar first because obviously I was a big Memphis wrestling fan. And if you remember the first run that he had out of New Jersey, Paul E tried to get him and had him do his debut match at Studio 54, right? Paul E saw, I think, dollar signs even at his young age then. But Larry Sharp had helped Bam Bam train at the Monster Factory and got him booked with a spot with Lawler in Memphis in 85. And I got the tapes and would see, and I mean, where else? To me, if Bam Bam Bigelow came along today in the environment, in the business today, he might be the biggest star in the business. Because think about this: everybody else now is somewhat cookie cutter, or at least on the mainstream scene. Most of the guys that you can take seriously, they look like athletes, but they're too pretty in most cases. There's no real monsters out there. There's a couple. But if you could find a 25-year-old guy, 6'2", 400 pounds, tattooed head, legitimate badass, can talk, throw drop kicks, and come off the top rope. And I think Brock Lesnar could have a run for his money as a pay-per-view attraction, because this guy, you were convinced that Bam Bam was much meaner a person than Brock Lesnar. Brock is over because of his legitimate background that everybody knows. But if you didn't know Brock's background and you just looked at the two of them side by side, Bam Bam Bigelow looked like he would eat Brock Lesnar, right? And so I think if he came along today, he'd be one of the biggest stars in the business because he was somebody you could believe. And I think he didn't have as many runs. He didn't have a big dominant run at the top that I think that he should have had. I think he tripped over some bad booking early on. Remember, George Scott brought him to Texas and made him a Russian. Crusher Yurkov. I'm sure the fans had fun with that. And I worked with him first in 88. It was late 88 when he came in WCW, and he was a babyface off of his WWF run. And Humperdinck was his manager, which, once again, Humperdinck's a great manager. I didn't see Bam Bam as a babyface. People liked him, but I saw him having kind of like a Bruiser Brody type of aura if anybody had just used him as the heel, the guy, right? So I think that also today with if he adopted a minimalist approach and was more like a tattooed biker instead of having the flame tights that, everybody had in the cartoon era up there at that point, but just the physical guy himself. But here's the story I wanted to tell you after I've said all of that about how badass Bam Bam was. Match in, 95 at WrestleMania with Lawrence Taylor. And because I'm not a football fan, but I know who Lawrence Taylor was, right? But it was another celebrity, match. Not my thing, but at least, okay, they're going to give Bam Bam a top spot, and he can probably get a match out of Lawrence Taylor if anybody can, right? This is what I'm thinking. But I had to listen to everybody in the office and Bruce Pritchard and everybody. Oh, Lawrence Taylor, New York, especially Russo. Lawrence Taylor, New York, big deal. Oh, great football player, because they were all football fans, right? And in effect, it was kind of like they felt that it was a big deal to have Lawrence Taylor on the show. I don't think the buy rate necessarily reflected that in the general fan's mind. But I'm thinking this guy, Bam Bam, is going to have to really put in a performance of a lifetime here to make this not embarrassing. And Bam Bam put in the performance of a lifetime. Here's a guy who had not had the best habits in his entire life and was in his 30s. It was 400 pounds and certainly didn't have a svelte physique. And here's the guy that's supposed to be, and has been in the past, a world-class professional athlete and this big-time pro football player, and just accolades or allocades, as Luger used to say. And when they came back from the ring after that match, this is not a racial thing to say, Lawrence Taylor had turned white. He was translucent. You looked in his face and you saw the face of death. He was so blown up that he didn't have enough breath to breathe hard anymore. He was almost like going into something, and some kind of shutdown of all of his bodily functions, and had no blood in his face, and they're helping him find a place to sit down. And here comes Bam Bam with all those things I mentioned, 400 pounds and blah, blah, blah. And he came through like that was a fucking match, because it got over in front of those people. But that's a tribute to the kind of talent that he had. And I know he got a good run in ECW for a while. And I imagine Bam Bam Bigelow showing up from scratch now with no cartoony outfit, being treated as a legitimate badass and having the attitude of ECW Taz.
Yes.
Think what kind of impact that could make in the wrestling business right now. He'd be the biggest star in it.
And he was super light.
It was a time where, he didn't hurt anybody. He was a master craftsman. He came along at a time where there were a lot of big guys, but nobody could do what he could do.
Yeah, he was a really good guy, too. I worked with him in Japan, and then I didn't wrestle with him, but we traveled in Japan together, and then I got to work him a few times in ECW, and he was so easy to work with.
Yeah, well, and he was a cool guy, and kind of the Jersey thing. Of course, I knew Larry Sharp and also Dennis Corluzzo, and Larry were partners for a while. So, whatever song we could talk about all those guys from Jersey. And just he was professional. He was willing to help guys. And actually, I think probably was a little too, what's the word I'm searching for? Giving with sometimes some of the guys that he worked.
Yeah, there is that, especially in WWF in those years. You've got to fight for yourself a little bit and protect yourself, and he was very, very giving in the ring.
And at the same time, can you imagine anybody wanted to try to take something that he didn't want to give them? That would have been interesting. And once again, that goes back to, in today's environment, you need to find a guy like that could be believable, and he could be believable because you didn't have to exaggerate it. The flame tights. But that was the flavor of the showbiz, early 90s WWF, whatever. But you didn't have to give him a gimmick because he was a gimmick. Figure out what that badass would have fought in, because that's, I think, sometimes his clothing didn't do him any favors, and just tell the truth about the fucking guy. But you got to put him over everything, and you got to, to invest the time and make sure he's the guy you want to go with, because it's like I told Batista when he was in OVW. I said, you're not going to be taking arm drags in the second match, pal. You need to be in the main event or you might as well go home. So we need to figure you out you have a short window at your age and injury proneness. We need to get you a gimmick of some kind and get you in the ring with the Taker, Kane, and Big Show, and then you can say sayonara. Imagine how it turned out. Wouldn't you know who won the pony there? But anyway. But yeah, Bammer was a guy that he could work with anybody because he knew, how to get something out of most everybody, and he was versatile enough. He didn't just do his shit.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts, Jimmy.
There comes a time in every man's life when he gets a chance. Yeah, opportunity knocks. Well, it's knocking right now, and it's knocking on my door. Because I am Bam Bam Bigelow, and I am the Beast from the East, and my opportunity is to take on you, Bret Hart, the Hitman, the World Wrestling Federation champion. I got to give you some credit. You've been taking on title match after title match, each time being successful. Well, this time is your last time, Bret Hart. Because when I get you in the ring, it's no more fun, it's no more games, it's all serious. And I mean business, Bret Hart, because I'm going to be the next World Wrestling Federation champion.
All right, I'm joined by WWE Hall of Famer Diamond Dallas Page. And Dallas, you and Bam Bam go way back.
Oh, God, it was so far back. I got to preface this. We were born in the same county as Bruce Springsteen, John Bon Jovi, Jack Nicholson, and Danny DeVito. Isn't that crazy? That's just to name a couple. But those are if you take the top guys in wrestling, because Bam, why he is not in the Hall of Fame, I don't know, because he's a Hall of Famer, especially when you just look at his entire career, what he did. To be, I think I was about 6-7 years older than him. And I remember the first time I met Bam Bam, he was 16 or just turning 17. And he was already 330 pounds. And, as we all know, if you know any of Bam Bam's, career, he was never the fat guy. He was just the big, bad son of a bitch, and he literally, by the time he was 18, because he was like a little legendary, in our area for a high school kid, comes out there in his junior year and he's over 300 pounds. And there's guys who refuse to wrestle him, they just said, give him the win. So he had a little legendary folklore, I think the word is. But by the time he was 18, he was running with the Breed, which was a big biker gang in our area. And I was running this place called Club Xanadu. And, when you run a nightclub, you're sort of like a little bit famous in whatever area you're in, if it's a hot nightclub. And he would come in with just a couple of the guys, a couple of the Breed, because we were more of a dance rock place. We had rock bands, and then in between it, we had this unbelievable sound system. So it was more of a dance club. You know, and I'd end up over with Bam and walk up behind him like, no trouble in here tonight, Bam Bam. Because he was called Bam Bam back then. You know, he was Bam Bam since he was like, I don't think he was ever a little kid. You know, but I'd walk up and I'd go, no trouble in here tonight, Bammer. You'd be like, oh, Paige, come on, you know I wouldn't do that to you. And, you know, at one point we end up, we're both, you know, just sitting at the bar, you know, having shots or drinks or whatever. And, you know, we start talking about wrestling. And, you know, and I told him, you know, how, you know, I had tried it, you know, when I was 22, which was like a year, maybe about a year or two before, maybe 3 years, 2 years, at least two years before that. And then, you know, I had 3 matches. I was the shits, you know, but I was handsome Dallas Page because I was a big handsome Jimmy Valiant fan. And I thought, of course, I was paying homage to, you know, the Valiant one. But I didn't realize I was actually stealing his gimmick. You know, bottom line is, I told him how I, you know, had a couple matches and then I hurt my knee and then it became more about the, you know, the bar business. It was more about the booze, the broads, and the party. And I got when I hurt my knee, I got the opportunity to run my first like rock, I wouldn't call it a nightclub at all. It was more like a bar that just happened to play rock music and had one bar in there, and it was a lot of fun because there was 2 bars on each side of this place. So if you came to that area, you could go to 3 different bars and bounce back and forth. And you know, that was my first foray into actually running clubs. Up to that point, I'd bounced, bartended, I'd done everything but done that. And now I'm in Asbury Park, which was literally 1 block away from the Stone Pony, where Bruce would play. You know, I saw him there one time, 18 Sundays in a row. He got up and played with a band called Cats on a Smooth Surface. So, you know, we're in Asbury. We're 1 block from the Stone Pony. And, you know, and Bam and I just start talking about wrestling. And I'm like, dude, how are you not doing this? You know, and, you know, I always want to be a wrestler, man, you know, maybe someday. And, you know, and he'd come in the club, and we'd have some laughs. And so knowing him from there, and then I don't see him for a while. One of the things is he won this arm wrestling tournament in Atlantic City. And the guy he faced in the finals was like, I want to say like 6'8" and like 420.
Oh, Jesus.
And yeah, right. And you know, like, you know, Bam had beaten him, and, you know, a little bit add to the folklore of Bam Bam Bigelow. And then one night I'm home and literally was flicking the channels. You remember we used to have to turn the channel?
Yep.
You know, and there wasn't really cable back then, but there was a couple of UHF channels, and I came across, and I didn't really even know what it was because I grew up in the WWF days. So, you know, I'd heard, you know, I'd seen magazines and seen Dusty Rhodes in them and stuff, but I really didn't understand all the different federations because, you know, WWF dominated everything. So I thought, like, that's the Mecca, you know? So I didn't really pay attention to all of the smaller feds. And I caught him on the WCCW, which I would later realize what that was. But I just see Bam Bam wrestling in Dallas. And I'm like, oh, my God, he's doing it. And I only caught like this last half of his match. And I was thinking, man, you know, he moved like a cat. Bam, even though he was about 6'2.5", 6'3", and, you know, would at some point be like from 400 pounds, he still moved like he was, you know, 5'9" and $180. You know, the guy could move like a cat. And then, you know, I lost touch with it a little bit, and then I see him show up on the show, the WWF, and Hogan is you remember some of the stuff that like Hogan gave him, like the Don, like gave him like, this is the guy coming up, the young guy. I mean, he was in a hell of a spot, you know.
And he was only like a year or so in the business, and he was tagging with Hogan in the mid '80s. It was crazy.
You know, getting to watch Bam roll into all of that, that was pretty friggin' amazing, you know. And you're a local boy. I mean, friggin', we're 2 towns away from each other, you know. It was great to see, and it showed what, of course, you're 350 pounds and can move like a cat, little different animal, you know, but it just showed that you could actually get there, you know.
Yeah. And how, like, did you stay in touch with him during that time, or did you not really stay that close until you guys worked together in WCW?
No, we'd actually, you know, talk occasionally. It wasn't like, you know, with the schedule. And back then, the schedule that those crazy bastards had. I mean, I know for a fact that Jake worked 90 straight days, double shots on Saturdays and Sundays. And remember, there's no cell phones back then. So guys don't stay in touch with each other with the cell phone because they have half that schedule. But you know, occasionally, you know, we catch up, and we'd always, whenever we'd see each other, we'd have a different number because we had moved or whatever, and we'd catch up. And I wouldn't hear from Bammer for a while because I saw where, you know, I loved the match that he did with, oh my God, LT.
Yes.
You know, like when you know, I've been in a few celebrity matches myself, so I know how hard that is. But when you got an athlete like LT and those guys, you know, I mean, God, they put some time in. That wasn't like your 4-minute match. Like, you know, Bama really had to really work with him and made it watchable. Of course, LT was gassed to the gills. Yeah, that's how I remember that. But again, I might have run because he would always come home. You know, he would always be out. If he was back home, you might see him at the Pony or the Quack Quack, which was in between my place that I had and the Pony. It was like little dive bars you'd catch him in because he was Asbury Park, New Jersey. And so I would occasionally see him, and you know, getting each other's numbers and catch him back up. But when he saw me, now he had gone to Japan and become a monster star in Japan.
He was awesome in Japan.
Oh my God! Again, that's where you really got to see Bam Bam go. And you know, I might get a tape or find something or a match with him or whatever. But I, you know, just always amazed with his athletic ability. But when I made it to WCW, and I actually had got in the ring, and maybe it's about 6 months in, and he gave me a call, and he said, "Paige, I can't believe you're doing it again. How old are you now?" I said, I think I was 36 or 37 at the time. He goes, "You're fucking doing it, bro. You're doing it." I'm like, "Yeah, man, I can't believe it." I go, "Damn, this fake stuff hurts like hell." He started laughing, and you know, we talked a little bit. And then I didn't talk to him, God, you know, for a while until he wanted to come into WCW, and he called me up and he said, "You know, I need some exposure back on, you know, American TV." You know, him and Vince did not have the best relationship, so he wasn't going back there. But he'd called me up, and I was like, "Dude, sure, man, I'll put the word in," you know. And you know, I helped open the door for him, and to get to be tag team champions. And Canyon was one of my boys, as you know, too. I love Chris Canyon. He was an awesome guy. And man, when I put that triad together with the three of us, like my favorite tag team of all time, as far as the work and the swag and the rap, is the Freebirds. But I loved the way, Michael talked and, and just his whole energy and his charisma in the ring. To me, if P.S. Hayes was 22 years old today, he would be the guy in, WWE. I mean, he would just suck all the charisma. It would really be interesting to see him there at that time. But, that's how I envisioned the tryout. But we could all go, and I would have been the voice, the mouthpiece for that. But, the bookers, they see their own thing, as we both know. Doesn't always turn out the way you envision it. But for us to be the tag team champions, the two guys from the Jersey Shore who had known each other by that time, God, because I was 43 or 4, somewhere around there. I can't remember exactly. But you figure I'd known this cat for, over 20 years. And then, and I know it was a lot like that for you with when you guys all came together. You guys came up together kind of with Edge and Christian, all you guys, Callis, like you all were in that same group of guys. And the guys who worked the hardest, get to the spot. It's it was pretty cool.
Yeah, and Bam Bam was such an amazing worker. I got to work with him. I traveled with him in Japan for half a dozen tours when we both worked for War, and then I got to work with him in ECW. And it's like, for such a big cat that moves so well, he was light as a feather. He took care of everybody. It was amazing.
And I think that's one of the reasons it busted him up too. Because what guys were jumping off the top or just dropping off the top rope and dropping the headbutt. I mean, it's 300 minimum 20 to 400 pounds coming down, and when he hits you, it's like he didn't hit you. He took really good care of you, and he took the brunt, of the bump.
Yeah, the first time I saw him wrestle live in Japan, he was working with Tenryu for Tenryu's group, and I don't know if I'd ever live seen anybody capture an audience and own a room like Bam Bam did in Japan. It was just amazing. It's like, man, he's got everybody in this building in the palm of his hand. I always thought Japan was his best market. He was so phenomenal over there.
Well, again, looking at what Japanese, and like today there's some pretty badass, big-ass Japanese guys. But back then, there was nothing like him. And again, nobody had tats except for bikers or military guys, and here's this guy's got his head covered in tats. And, you talk about and I know the guy, because the guy who did my original tattoos was this guy named Gene. And Gene was the guy who did all of Bam Bam's tats on his head. Again, from the same area, we had the same tattoo artist too. Never really even knowing that till later, but for the way the Japanese had to look at this mammoth, it was kind of like Leon. Vader. Vader come out with that big gimmick on his head and shit, and Stan Hansen coming through, and he'd get that freaking bull robe, and he'd just be whipping people and shit. They'd be running for their lives. Bam Bam was a shoot too. He could go. he would run with the toughest guys on the planet. So he was a gentle giant, but he could be one mean ass son of a bitch too.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Is there any last memory or stories of Bam Bam you want to share before we wrap up?
I can't remember what I said, but I was at his funeral, and when I came to, I went to his wake first, and Terry McGovern, who was like my big brother and his big brother, he was Bruce Springsteen's right-hand man for 20 plus years. And like any point in time, we wanted tickets or anything, Terry would, hook us up, and not just for us, for any of the boys, and I'm talking about right there next to the stage, right next to Bruce, I have a great picture of me and Bammer and Springsteen that I have on my wall. But so now I'm at that wake, there was every biker, and there was a couple of suits there. It was the most diverse group of people you've ever seen. So now we're at the funeral the next day, and these big, badass bikers are getting up there, and they're all crying. I mean, they are just, there ain't no big, badass biker that ain't crying. So Toddy, his brother, comes up to me, and he goes, D, you gotta save this, man. Bammer would hate this. He goes, get up there, and please. So I look at my brother. I go, I don't even know what to say. He goes, just speak from the heart. He goes, that's what you do. And I don't remember. It was before, on my way to the funeral, I started putting on a suit, and then I stopped myself. And I go, what the hell am I doing? And I put on my jeans, a T-shirt, and my leather jacket. And that's where that was the main dress. It's funny because a lot of the bikers wore suits. But I went up there to the podium, and I wish I could remember what I said. But whatever I said in that first line or two, whatever the mannerism I had, the whole place burst out laughing. And it was something about, Bammer's, I can't even remember. I can't do it justice. All I know is as soon as they burst out laughing, I was on a roll. And I probably did about 10 minutes on them and had them just laughing and just thank you for relieving the pressure. It was a moment. I got off the I call it a stage, the church thing, pew or whatever I was in, and Toddy just gave me a big hug. He's like, "Oh, D, thanks for saving that." It was funny. It was a good moment. I appreciate you honoring one of our brothers here, and especially a Jersey boy. So I appreciate that, man.
All right, thanks a lot, Dallas.
Hey, buddy.
I really want to thank everyone, all our guests, for sharing their thoughts with Bam Bam Bigelow. As I mentioned earlier, it's like he was just such a really good friend, and I want everyone to remember, not just the legacy that he had as one of the greatest big men of all time, but just such a great down-to-earth human being. And I really hope, I've heard the rumors that he may go in the WWE Hall of Fame this year. I really hope that's true. I'd love to see him go in, and I just want to thank everybody for remembering him with us. Rest in peace, Bam Bam Bigelow. Next week, we're going to be back with our regular show, and we're going to finally get, I'm going to make a promise this time, and hopefully we can keep it, that we are going to get to Retro ECW number 10, which was October 29th, 1999. I'm actually going to have to rewatch the show. It's been so long now, but we're going to get that next week. If you have questions or comments you'd like to share with us, you can send them to killingthetown@gmail.com. You can follow the show at KillingTheTown on Twitter. He's at Cyrus Overhuge, and I'm at Lance Storm.
Whoa, Lance, I just want to point out one thing. Top talent, you need to listen up. Podcast One is a brand new app for you to discover the show. Find out everything about your favorite Podcast One shows, including Killing the Town, through the all-new Podcast One app, available now in the App Store or on Google Play. Find links to articles, social media, make playlists with your favorite episodes, and connect with other fans of the show. You can even create your own polls so that you can debate the topics we cover on the podcast. We have our own community on there, so please join us. Check out exclusive content such as behind-the-scenes photos and much more. And if you have 360 video or watch shows in virtual reality, there's over 1,000 videos on the app right now. It's like you're in the studio. There's no other podcast app like this. Download the all-new Podcast One app in the App Store or on Google Play.
I would also like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who bring our podcast to you free every week, specifically TrueCar. When you're looking to buy a new or used car, visit TrueCar to enjoy a more confident car buying experience. And that's it for this week, everybody. Stay safe and stay open.
Download new episodes of the Jericho Network's Killing the Town with Lance Storm and Cyrus every Tuesday on the Podcast One app, at iTunes, or at PodcastOne.com.
Podcast One and Sound of Success present Oh My, a celebration of Dick Enberg. a special Sound of Success episode commemorating one of the greatest sportscasters of all time. Hosted by Rich Eisen and Susie Schuster, with interviews and stories from Vin Scully, Jim Nantz, Bill Walton, Dan Patrick, Billie Jean King, Steve Kerr, and more. Find Oh My, a celebration of Dick Enberg on PodcastOneSports.com and the Podcast One app.
Applying for term life insurance is easy and affordable, and frankly, kind of enjoyable. Here, I'll prove it to you. Go to havenlife.com. Haven Life is a different kind of life insurance agency. No pressure, no upselling, no hassle. Apply now at havenlife.com.
For details about Symbicort, budesonide formoterol fumarate dihydrate, visit SymbicortHCP.com.